Working? You can hear this? Video on? Good morning.
Good morning.
My team want to take their seats. Lauren, Judy, calling you out. Thank you. All right. So, all right. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the second of our two New Jersey Water Bank seminars. My name is David Zimmer. I'm the Executive Director of the Infrastructure Bank. You're going to hear from a number of folks both at the iBank and the DEP. And hopefully when you leave today or when you turn off your webinar, you'll have a lot more information about this program, what's new, the amount of funding that has been made available from both a federal and a state level. And you'll have an opportunity after the presentations to go into individual sessions, both legal, finance, and operations, and ask specific questions. So again, our hope is that you walk out of here with a lot of very relevant information. Yeah, thanks. Okay. There we go. So the agenda for today, we're going to start out with the folks from the DEP. They're going to talk to you about the intended use plan, which is really the ranking methodology. It describes the amount of funding and the specific principal forgiveness and loan packages that the program is making available, again, given the amount of new federal and state funds that have been made available to the program. That's going to be followed up by the DEP's socially and economically disadvantaged group. I will follow suit and talk about some of the highlights in the financing program, and then we're going to hear from Alok on our H2 loans portal, what's new there. We'll have an opportunity throughout for people to ask questions. You're going to have the option to either raise your hand. If you're doing this by webinar, you can certainly put questions in the chat. We're going to be following that. To the extent that we have a lot of questions after anybody speaks, we may not get to all of the questions so that we stay on time, but we will come back to any questions for folks that are viewing this on a webinar. So don't worry, your questions will get addressed at some point. For the people that are in the webinar, if you want to link into either, again, the legal, the finance, or the operations Q&A sessions after the presentation, just go to our webpage, njib.gov. You're looking at news and then very specifically njeit.589, and it'll show you the three links so that you can call in on a Teams call. All right, so first up, talk about Bill, ARPA, IUP. I think we left out a couple of acronyms there. And technical assistance, Charles? Yes, Charles Jenkins, Assistant Director for the Municipal Finance and Construction element.
That's correct.
There you go.
Thank you, David.
Yep.
Good morning, everyone. So moving right into it, today I'm going to speak about the BIL and ARPA, the intended use plans upcoming for state fiscal year 2024, a basic overview of the application steps to get started on the path to financing, and technical assistance opportunities. This is the department's webpage. So when the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and American Rescue Plan were enacted, certain monies came to the DEP, and the Commissioner of DEP developed the concept of this Water Infrastructure Investment Plan to emphasize the increased opportunities resulting from that legislation. So this is the landing page. If you go to the department's main page, it'll be a tile towards the bottom of the landing page for DEP.
Hey, Charles, sorry to interrupt you, but
Sure.
you might want to put a plug. This Friday, you guys are going to host a webinar specific to WIP and the funds available, correct?
Yes.
People need to register,
Yes.
and would they go to the WIP homepage to do that?
Yes, so we've done email blasts, so hopefully everyone relevant has received one, but if not, you can go to the webpage. So this is just a schematic showing how the water bank gets money coming in. So starting from the upper left and going around clockwise, every year there's a capitalization grant for both clean water and drinking water that comes from the US EPA. That's based off of the needs surveys that are done nationwide every few years. There is also currently the bipartisan infrastructure law and American Rescue Plan money that's coming into the program. There are occasionally funds coming directly from New Jersey DEP, which are usually damage recovery funds that help to assist us with certain types of projects. Of course, you have the Infrastructure Bank, who is the department's financing partner that makes up the water bank. They provide the market rate financing. We have repayments coming in from previously issued loans. All the way to the left at 9 o'clock is State of New Jersey. So most federal funds have a state match requirement. So we do get certain funds coming in from the state into the water bank. And then bottom left, the below market rate funding is what results. So that below market rate funding could be either a base loan or it could be a loan that includes principal forgiveness. In terms of eligibility, who's eligible? So for clean water, it's pretty easy. It needs to be a local government unit, so that can be township, city, borough, etc. It can be an authority, it can be a county, it can be a regional water authority that own environmental infrastructure. Recently, the program has expanded to include private entities, and that's through a conduit borrower. So the borrower is still a local government unit, but ultimately the beneficiary of that financing is the private entity. Private colleges and universities have recently been added for non-point source controls. In terms of who is not eligible to come in, federally owned and privately owned. And across the bottom, you'll see various types of infrastructure that are fundable through the Clean Water Program. So basic wastewater infrastructure, this is where the program started back in the late 70s with construction grants. So all the typical things associated with wastewater. Stormwater management was added subsequently. We do participate in the water quality components of site remediation, wastewater recycling and reuse, equipment purchases. So these are probably our easiest type of project to get through the program. They don't require much review. They're often procured through vendors. And then we do finance planning and design. So the caveat there is if you receive money for planning and design activities, ultimately a capital improvement project must result. On the drinking water side of things, eligible recipients are privately owned and publicly owned water systems. So kind of the acid test for drinking water financing is the applicant must be a public water system ID holder. In terms of not eligible, analogous to the clean water side, federally owned systems, and also for-profit non-community systems. In terms of eligible projects, new facilities or upgrades to existing, unfinished reservoirs, that's a high priority, rehabilitation of contaminated sources, and we do have enhanced financing, which I'll go over in a few minutes to talk about that a little more. Lead service line replacement, that is also probably one of the top 3 priorities of the department in terms of drinking water needs and human health considerations. Just the overall need to maintain water main systems, and then also resilience, vulnerability, and security. And these are the basic groupings in the priority system. So depending on where a project falls, they'll be in one or more of these categories, and points are assigned according to the intended use plan and project priority system. Projects that implement climate resilience get additional points. And then also green infrastructure or efficiency projects get enhanced points. Also, the department has moved to make the clean water SRF and drinking water SRF programs consistent in terms of looking at project affordability and disadvantaged communities. If a project sponsors community, basically is 80% or less, the median household income, 80% or less of the statewide median household income, it qualifies as an affordability project, and that generally leads to enhanced financing packages. And then you'll see on the upper right, there are a couple of modifiers to that based on unemployment or population. Environmental justice, or EJ, that's the common acronym that's thrown around. An EJ, economic overburden community, you see there is when at least 35% of the communities qualify as low income. The bipartisan infrastructure law. So New Jersey's share of that overall legislation is $900 million over the next 5 years. So we did get our first installment. It was roughly $170 million in the first allotment. And then ultimately, over the 5-year span, we'll have the $900 million. And excuse me, I'm getting over a little bit of a cold, so excuse me. So in terms of monies that were authorized for clean water, $72 million for any eligible clean water project. And there are stipulations with that BIL money, and it pretty much goes across the board. 49% needs to be used for principal forgiveness. So for those not familiar with the program, principal forgiveness is just that it's a portion of the principal that doesn't need to be paid back. Very similar to a grant, although it is managed a bit differently administratively. $4 million for projects that address emerging contaminants on the clean water side of things. And then you see on drinking water, $31 million for any eligible drinking water project. Again, that 49% for PF requirement. $49 million for projects that address lead. Excuse me. Pardon me, folks. 49 million for lead. So 49% of that must go out as PF. And then 13 million on the drinking water side for PFAS projects. So in terms of project development and implementation, things are moving much more quickly and significantly on the drinking water side for PFAS because that is a requirement, whereas on the clean water side of things, we're in the very early stages of addressing PFAS. It's mostly trying to track down potential sources of PFAS to develop strategies in the future for treatment. So the total impact, again, is that almost $1 billion. And then when you factor in the program's ability to leverage funds, that results in about $440 million a year of new project funding. When you add that to the base program, we're looking at about $900 million being available per year. The intended use plan, this is a document that's required every year by the US EPA. It's part of our delegation agreement. It needs to be open to public comment. So I guess it was maybe 2 months ago now, we had our draft IUP hearing for state fiscal year 24. This document establishes funding eligibilities and terms of financing. It details how the project priority system works. There's a lot of information in that IUP that goes beyond the limited time we have today. So I urge anyone with questions, please take a look at the IUP. You can go to the WIP webpage and click on the IUP link, and it will direct you to the clean water and drinking water IUPs. So for upcoming state fiscal year 24, which starts July 1st of this year, we have about $148 million in American Rescue Plan Act funds for principal forgiveness for CSO long-term control projects. So we had about $250 million for that purpose to start. So we've already obligated about $100 million of that 250. And then we have $20 million in ARPA funds for principal forgiveness for drinking water projects that address multiple violations or for project resilience. And we had about 50 to start with. so we have about 20 left. We also are developing and expanding existing technical assistance programs to help entities assess their needs, assess their capabilities, develop their priorities, etc., and also to navigate the process. So many of our loanees are repeat customers and they have a familiarity, but we do have many applicants that are new applicants and they do need that additional guidance to get them familiar with the requirements and work their way through the process. So in terms of how long a loan can be, recently US EPA extended CSO projects out to 45 years. And if there's a portion of the project financed through WIFIA, up to 35 years. So the basic loan term is 30 years max, or the useful life of the project, whichever is less. And then just a little caveat on that affordability calculation, we do round down. This chart is in the state fiscal year 24 Clean Water SRF IUP. Going from top to bottom, CSO ARPA projects get an 80% principal forgiveness share. And then the remainder is financed through a combination of DEP 0% money and iBank market rates. So essentially 80 free money, 10% market, 10% zero. There is no cap per applicant on those funds. And again, we have about 150 million left. CSO abatement, these are projects that reduce the frequency, duration, or volume of combined sewer discharges. So these could be things like sewer separation or tankage to hold overflows to bleed back to the treatment plant, etc. And they can be either a gray hard engineering technique or a green infrastructure technique or a combination. So on a per year basis, applicants can get up to $5 million of principal forgiveness. So if they had a $10 million project, half of it would be principal forgiveness, half of it would be financed with that DEP share of 75%, 0% interest, 25% iBank share. So that's an additional enhancement beyond the PF, is a greater proportion of the DEP 0% funds. If there's a community in a CSO area that also meets affordability, we try to capture 100% PF for that first 5 million. And then we have the DEP share of 75-25 again for CSO projects. Water quality restoration, this is for projects that address things like harmful algae blooms, beach closings, shellfish bed closings, and the PF cap there is 2.5 with a 50% PF share. And then the remainder, again, the 75-25 DEP versus iBank. If a project, any project qualifies for affordability, they can get 100% PF for up to that first 2 million per year. 75-25 for the remainder. Energy and water efficiency projects, so loosely speaking, these are projects that qualify for US EPA's Green Project Reserve. Generally, there needs to be demonstrated a 20% or more energy efficiency achievement through project implementation. 50% PF, the 2 million cap, 75-25 for the remainder. A couple of years ago, we got a certain amount of money from US EPA, about maybe $5 million total, to implement overflow and stormwater grants, or OSG grants. So those are to address things like persistent stormwater problems or sewer system bottlenecks that are resulting in overflows. That's a 20% PF share, up to 200,000 per applicant, and there's about $1 million available. Emerging contaminants, so again, this is in the very early stages of development. We're looking at providing up to 100% PF to that $2 million threshold, remainder 75-25. And then the base program, so anything that doesn't qualify for PF falls into the base program, which is still a very good deal compared to market rate financing, and that would be 50% 0% interest funds from DEP and 50% at market rate from the iBank. Brownfield redevelopment, so this usually comes in the form of a redevelopment authority or a developer coming in for funds. Typically, they're not eligible, but they are eligible if they have a public sponsor. And there you see they get a slightly less advantageous deal of 25% of the zero money, 75% of the market rate. Moving into drinking water. So the base program there, again, is 50-50. Unless it's an investor owned, they get a slightly less advantageous deal of 25 versus 75% iBank. Affordability projects get that 75-25 benefit. And then if it's a high ranking affordability project, we're looking to give 100% PF up to 2 million and the remainder at 75-25. And then nano projects, so these are 10,000 population or less, so I need to make that correction for future presentations. So the population threshold is 10,000, 50% PF up to $500,000, and then the remainder is 75-25. And then even smaller systems than nanos are the very small water systems. That's a population of 1,000 or less, and we're looking to give out 100% PF up to 1 million, and then all DEP money for the remainder. So these systems typically have trouble meeting affordability. They have trouble implementing projects because they don't have a large user base to spread their costs out over. Lead service line replacements, that has 50% PF up to 5 million per applicant. So that PF also requires it to be in an affordability area. What the DEP does allow is for entities to come in and demonstrate that they're focusing on census tracts that meet affordability. So if they can demonstrate the combination of their census tract meets affordability, they will qualify for the principal forgiveness, even though the overall community might not meet that affordability requirement. Then we have some supplemental funds available for lead line replacement, depending on how the funding year works out. Emergency contaminants, including PFAS, emerging contaminants, 100% PF up to 2 million. So these are the PFAS projects. We probably have about 30 plus active projects in the program currently for that purpose. And then we have climate change resilience, or the multiple violations. That's the ARPA money. 80% of costs covered with principal forgiveness, and then the remainder at 10% DEP, or 90% DEP, 10% iBank. This is just an overview of the general process and milestones. So the first thing that happens is a project is submitted through H2 loans. We look at it to give a basic determination of project eligibility. And if it meets the criteria, then it goes on to priority ranking, gets put on the project priority list, which is updated 4 times a year. One thing to keep in mind is that you will not be able to move to a loan closing unless your project is on a project priority list. After eligibility and priority ranking, then we move into the project planning. The end result of the state environmental review process, which includes environmental and cultural resource review, is the environmental decision document. So that is the official document that the department issues that summarizes the project scope, the alternatives that were evaluated, any potential environmental impacts, socioeconomic, and identifies the selected plan. Next step in the process is project design. So one thing I want to point out is that some of these steps do often progress concurrently rather than consecutively. So depending on how developed the project is when it comes into us, design may already be complete, and that's fine. But typically, design follows the planning, and that includes contract documents, loan application, and permitting. Excuse me. So provided all those previous steps are successfully navigated, the department issues an authorization to advertise or an authorization to procure. So certain things like procurement through a vendor are not advertised. So in general, that step is, okay, you can maintain your eligibility, it's okay to go out and procure. Subsequent to that is authorization to award. That also comes from the department. So very important things to keep in mind. If you procure or you award without the DEP's express written approval, then that work will not be eligible for financing. After the issuance of the authorization to award, DEP certifies, that's the term we use, we certify that contract to the iBank, and that lets the iBank know that all the DEP requirements have been met. So the project will move into short-term loan award and also construction and loan management. So some people here that have been through the process may be familiar with short-term loans can be awarded either when the construction contract is certified or based upon a planning and design agreement that's been certified. So some project sponsors want to take advantage of a short-term loan's ability to finance their planning and design costs as they develop the project. That's fine. That would typically happen at the front end of this whole process. In terms of being able to be reimbursed, only contracts that have been certified can be reimbursed. So say it's a $10 million project and $1 million of that is planning and design, you would get a short-term loan for $10 million based on that planning and design certification, but you would only be able to draw on that $1 million of certified P&D costs until you get to this step of the construction contract being certified. Once construction is wrapped up, then your short-term loan is rolled into a long-term, or converted, I guess is the correct term that I've heard, into the long-term loan. So that would be the 30, 35, or 45-year loan term. And then also the program requires after 1 year of operation that the borrower certify that the project was built in accordance with the approved documents and that it is functioning adequately. Technical assistance. So this is, we are ramping up our efforts to assist applicants. So some types of this technical assistance have long-standing status in the drinking water program. On the clean water side, we are also developing some technical assistance. So there's details there on the left. So we're looking to help disadvantaged communities. We're looking to help those that don't have a robust technical or administrative or financial group behind them to get them through the process. So this could be things like homeowners associations often need technical assistance because there may be only one or two people and they're typically one of the homeowners that were the lucky people that got volunteered to oversee their system. So they definitely need that bolstering from the state to assist them. And then there are new borrowers that have never been through the process. So like anything, if you're not familiar, you may not be sure of what to do or what to do next. So that's where technical assistance comes in to assist. And then for some of these smaller entities, they may actually need help with the engineering. So kind of on the right there is a recap of what I just said: program navigation, getting through the process, financial and needs assessments, what can I handle financially, what do I need to do to maintain compliance or improve my community or my infrastructure, the community engagement part. So the program does emphasize interaction with the public stakeholders at all steps of the process. And then on the drinking water side, again, engineering to do the actual hard work of designing the infrastructure. This is the landing page under the WIP for technical assistance. There's a bunch of different types of technical assistance topics there. The important thing to do is, if you're interested in technical assistance, go to this web page. There'll be a short questionnaire and some check boxes to kind of narrow down what it is you're interested in, and then that information is used by the programs to develop a technical assistance package for your community. And questions, I believe, will be handled at the end, or I can take now.
I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
Sure. I have a couple of questions. One is, are these procurements that are approved only bids, or do they allow for RFPs? And then my second question was, when you put a limit on for lead service line replacement programs, is it a 5 million cap on principal forgiveness per application? Does that mean the water company can cut up the vast amount of lead service line replacements into chunks that maximize this principal forgiveness, or is it a cap on the entity itself, the company?
I'll take the last question first. So it's 5 million per applicant per year. So what we have seen historically is that those that have lead service lines try to break up their project to meet their compliance requirements from the state, as well as maximize their funding opportunities. Now, in terms of procurement, back in the day, public bidding was the standard. That was the only way that projects could move forward. However, now we also consider things like design build. Depending on the type of project, if there's certain technologies that, the general contracting universe doesn't have expertise in. So if an entity demonstrates that there is something specific about their project that it's more appropriate for an RFQ, RFP, we can do that. And then there are vendor purchases. So these are often for things like water meters, street sweepers, sewer cameras, back trucks.
Charles, just to kind of segue on that, can people also utilize cooperatives?
State co-op?
Yes.
Yes, so they just have to demonstrate that it's a state-approved co-op, and we look to the applicant to demonstrate all of that to us.
So if there's a contract that is identified in another community and it's similar in scope to what the needs of that particular project is, they can certainly talk to you about not going out to bid and just procuring it through the...
Right, so there will be certain program requirements that still must be upheld. So if there's labor involved, the wage rates, and Rohini and Nanette will be speaking about SCD requirements, so they'll explain that part of it. So we still need to comply with SCD.
Okay, we have a number of questions from the online audience. First question, in considering emerging contaminants, would the removal/remediation of PFAS count?
On the clean water side or drinking water side?
So
drinking water, that's a standard project. It generally involves resin-filled vessels or granular activated carbon vessels as part of the treatment process. That's a well-established treatment technique, no issues there. On the clean water side, there is no requirement via permit yet at the state for removal of PFAS. So this is where the track down part is coming in. If an applicant did come in with a PFAS removal project, we would certainly move it forward. We're thinking that there's either going to be areas with groundwater contamination or perhaps facilities like landfills that may have PFAS in their leachate.
Okay. Next, will Federal Build America, Buy America Act, also known as BABA, apply to the NJ iBank funding? And if so, how will it be administered by the NJ DEP and the iBank?
So for any projects that have been submitted after May of this year, 2023, need to be BABA compliant. It's basically American Iron and Steel on steroids, so it covers additional things like lumber, plastics, wallboard. We do review contract documents to ensure that the federal boilerplate is in that contract document. And then we also follow through during construction management. Contractors and owners have to demonstrate that the materials incorporated in the project are BABA compliant.
Thank you. How do we add a project to the intended use plan?
So technically speaking, a project does not get added to the intended use plan, it gets added to the project priority list. So I don't want to steal anyone's presentation, but basically, if they haven't been a previous program applicant, they need to contact the iBank. The iBank will explain the process to get onto H2 loans. Ultimately, when we get to that stage of eligibility and project ranking, that's when a project is put on the priority list.
If a sewer project is pending approval or was just recently approved, how can we confirm the possibility for principal forgiveness?
I'm not really sure how to answer that question.
Principal forgiveness is essentially assigned when your construction contracts are certified through the program. So the department can give you an idea if you might qualify.
Oh, okay, yeah,
Right, so
yeah.
So, but you are not locked into principal forgiveness until you get construction contracts certified through the program, and each individual construction contract will have its own set of loan terms and principal forgiveness assignments.
George, that's based on what?
It's based on contract certification.
The time of the contract
Yes.
certification and the,
Fiscal year in which the contract is certified.
right, so the terms of the fiscal year in which the project is certified apply to the contract when the contract is certified. So you could have a project with 3 different contracts in it, and they could get certified over a 3-year period in each of 3 separate years, and you may end up with 3 separate long-term financing terms. Some might have principal forgiveness, some might have different iBank DEP ratios, but again, it's totally dependent upon when the department certifies that construction contract. You look to the terms of the financial program at that time.
And then the last online question we have is, can you comment on if pre-purchase or equipment can be financed as procurement, like a GAC vessel or similar?
That question has come up a lot because there are very real concerns about supply chain issues. So in terms of financing eligibility, anything associated with a project needs to go through the full review process. So unfortunately, we do not allow pre-purchase equipment purchased outside of the program approvals to be an eligible part of the project, nor can it be incorporated as part of an SRF project. So let's take the case of PFAS, so GAC vessels. If an entity decides, I just don't want to wait on the uncertainties of supply chain, I'm going to go out and procure my vessels, then I'm going to come to the state and say, hey, I have these vessels, I want to incorporate them into my SRF project. That we cannot do.
And I think for the interest of time, we'll move the rest of the questions to the end so that we can continue with the presentations. So David?
Yeah. Thanks, Charles. Lots of information. George, I want to confirm one thing. The presentations that are up here, right, so people can follow along, are they listed on the website for people that are on the webinar?
Yes,
There's a link?
Let me just check. And we can actually add it to
The chat?
the chat.
Add the link to the chat so that anybody that doesn't have it up that wants to follow along can certainly have that option. Okay, so I think most people know that when you come into the program, federal and state officials have a focus on achieving equity in any of their financing programs. This is not just the SRF. This is, nationally and certainly a priority for this governor. And so within our program, we work with the Office of Equal Opportunity and Public Contract Assistance, and we're going to hear from its director next, Rohini Gandhi.
Good morning.
Morning.
So, as David mentioned, the Office of Equal Opportunity and Public Contract Assistance oversees the SED program for the department. The mission of the Public Contract Assistance program comes from directives of EPA regulation and the New Jersey Administrative Code. They include the requirement that direct and indirect recipients of federal funding award contract participation to DBEs, disadvantaged business enterprises, which are also called SED, business concerns. To this end, participation of DBEs should be no less than 10% of the contract awarded for a construction project. The mission of the office is to monitor and enforce compliance with the application and implementation of these SED requirements. As part of that, we have Nanette Mathis-Bridgette leads the Public Contract Assistance Program for the office and has been making some updates to our program to try and be more effective and efficient in our review of projects. So I'm going to pass it on to Nanette to take us through the updates. Thank you.
Good morning as well. We have a number of updates, and we've modified processes and developed tools to streamline document submittals and increase efficiencies. We are continuing our endeavors in this regard to incorporate more technology where possible so we can further advance our efforts toward our mission of monitoring and compliance. The Office of Equal Opportunity Public Contract Assistance website, particularly the Public Contract Assistance Program, has a number of available resources, including access to a vendor list of SED, DBE contractors forms, as well as connection to other websites, like certifying agencies, in particular, New Jersey Treasury Selective Assistance Vendor Information, which is SAVVY, New Jersey Unified Certification Program, and the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey website. The monitoring efforts of the Public Contract Assistance Program include continuous project engagement with sponsors, project compliance officers. Key changes to the reporting forms that are submitted to us by the project compliance officer are that there is a consistent appearance with the forms. They reflect our Office of Equal Opportunity Public Contract Assistance phone number, as well as they all reflect the PCA email address, and where applicable, prime contractor's email address is also indicated. Presently, these forms are available through our website. We're also working with H2 Loans to make them available there, as well as other locations such as the Division of Water Quality, Municipal Finance Construction Element. I'd like to take this opportunity to underscore our heightened attention to compliance in an effort to encourage accurate and comprehensive reporting so that there is not a breakdown in endeavors for SED utilization and goal attainment, which could ultimately result in project impacts like halting payments. It's imperative that missteps are avoided, such as submittals that are insufficient because of inadequate supporting documents, missing signatures, missing invoices, use of subcontractors that are not SED certified, non-responsiveness to our office inquiries, and/or inadequate good faith efforts towards obtaining SED participation and goal attainment. SED review checklists. Our office, the Public Contract Assistance Program, has developed checklists to provide guidance to sponsors and to readily capture content details for ease of review. The Public Contract Assistance Program checklists are akin to the functionality of the SRF Design Document Review Guidance and SRF spec item checklist that many of you are presently familiar with and using, which is located on the Division Water Quality website and elsewhere. Key functional similarities that we have to that are that it has specific instruction and content guidance. Required document language is noted on there or through their checklist. There's form access as well as fillable fields for input of content information. So ours work very similar to this. The SED review checklist, there are two checklists, one to address the sponsor's SED contract specifications and its components. The other relates specifically to the sponsor's SED utilization plan and the elements particular to the development of that document. They include the cover page, the introduction, the scope and purpose, project sponsor obligation, definitions, in-house procedures, and forms. Here you see displayed the checklist that we have for SED review, the two that I've just referred to. Delving into the checklist, firstly, the SED contract document specification checklist, how it works. The user will work through the checklist by selecting the narrative on the list and will be auto-directed to the applicable details for the selected item. The section which the user is auto-directed to may contain instruction or required language that must be reflected in the document. The completed checklist should identify the location of the related content. The exception to this is where there is not required language, the user should initial the checklist field to acknowledge that they've seen that presented information. As stated on the checklist, it indicates that verbatim statements are the minimum required details to be inserted into the document. The project sponsor may certainly expand on these details as preferred. Forms may be accessed through auto-indexing similar to other areas of the checklist. The sponsor's SED utilization plan checklist operates in the same manner. Where there is not required language, please follow the noted instruction and identify content location. Verbatim statements are the minimum required details to be inserted. The project sponsor may expand on details as I noted before. And similarly, you'd go to a particular section, select that information, and follow the instructions that are indicated there. There may be, again, direction, such as what the user will have to do, providing, as it shows here an example, specific work to be formed. There may be specific language that is required to be included in the sponsor's SED plan. Also, indicating where the information is located within that plan should be noted in the fields, the fillable fields. The forms are also still accessible here as well. Want to note also here that for the SED sponsors utilization plan that it's not always required, and it doesn't always occur that the SED plan is attached, the sponsor's SED utilization plan is attached to the contract specification. If it is submitted separately, that should be indicated. There's a section on this checklist that allows for indicating that information. And it would be, yes, it's bound here, or it will be, or has been submitted separately. Document sharing. Documents are shared with our office through H2 Loans as well as through our email address. I've already touched on the matter of the quarterly and monthly submittals. Those should be submitted to our office via the email address for our office. Documents that would be submitted and we would look to see submitted through H2 loans, the SED contract specification, SED utilization plan, and any other additional direction you'll receive through our communication that we will send to you, as well as it will be noted on the H2 loans website. We do have an interdepartment collaboration, which we've had all along with the Division of Water Quality, Municipal Finance Construction element. Our program has this collaborative relationship with our partners there to bolster our reach in meeting the mission of the Public Contract Assistance Program and to heighten our compliance and monitoring efforts. We are supported with primary stage processing by Municipal Finance Construction element. In particular, vis-a-vis Carla Martin, many of you are familiar with her. She's been a key assistant there for our processes. She performs document reviews, or their office performs document reviews, provides feedback on behalf of the Public Contract Assistance Office program on contracts and specifications, sponsor SED utilization plans, and primary contractor SED utilization plans, as well as bid schedules. In addition to Municipal Finance Construction element provides representation for our office at pre-construction meetings. Though this is not a new update, this additional information I'm going to share is that our office also dialogues frequently with the department's construction engineers for expertise and insights regarding the viability of SED utilization and more. As needed, we also communicate with the payment and administration section of the Municipal Finance and Construction element to discuss any project issues that we may encounter where we're having ongoing problems with SED utilization responses, where there may be failings of getting through that process. And that communication could very well lead to potential impact to payment disbursements, such as stop payment. All these efforts that we ensue are geared toward endeavors for gaining inclusivity, for which we all benefit in the end. We're available to help. Feel free to contact our office should questions or concerns arise. Thank you for your time.
Lynette, I have a question.
Yep.
So in the very beginning, you talked about there's a minimum 10% goal to make sure that we include SED contractors in the total cost of the construction contract. But does that also include engineering or design work as well? Or is it just for contractors?
It can include engineering and design, but we would have to look at that later and in a broader scope. It would not be at the onset of the project. We're looking to, and thank you for emphasizing also the 10%. We do work with sponsors that have as much of a goal as 25%.
Excellent.
Rohini, would you like to add anything to that?
No, I mean, it's 10% for the total, so we can include it. It hasn't happened very often yet that the engineering and design piece is where project sponsors are hiring SED firms for that, but it can be included in the 10%.
And I would say refer to regulation. It also has details in relationship to that.
Okay.
We do have one question. Can you provide a link for those checklists? I don't see them on the EO website.
They have not been added to the website as yet because I wanted to have this opportunity to share this information in the seminar so that there's more instruction as to use of it. They will be added this week.
Thank you. All right, so next up is our financing leg. And we're going to talk about some general stuff, but we're also going to mention some of the more recent changes that benefit the program. So one of the first things that I want to talk about is there is money in this program now, a lot of money. Again, thanks to ARPA funds that the governor and the legislature appropriated from the federal ARPA bill to this program, $300 million last year, as well as the amount of bill funds that the program is going to be receiving, and will continue to receive over the next 5 years. So here's the breakdown, right? Just in Charles talked about, we've got the base SRF grant money, and then you've got the bill SRF grant funds. For this year, SFY 2023, there's approximately, and this includes funds that are sitting in the DEP's bank account as well, right? So there's just a little bit over $1.1 billion. Now, the iBank's going to leverage those funds by going out and raising money either through tax-exempt bond funds or whether we get it from our WIFIA loan deals, but to the tune of around $420 million. And then again, from the ARPA funds, we've got $293 million. So just a bit more than $1.8 billion available for the rest of this year, okay? In 2024, assuming we blow through all of that, you're going to have $258 million in SRF funds. We're going to leverage that with another $287 million of borrowed funds. So we'll have $545 million for next year's SRF program. Now, we don't all spend it in a 1 year. It rolls over into the next year. So when you look out over the next 2 years to June of 2024, we're going to have $2.38 billion in anticipated funds. All right, I might be off by 100 million or so, but that puts you in the ballpark, right? $2.4 billion. Again, a lot of money. So anybody that looks at this program and it says, yeah, but 2 years ago, I tried to do a drinking water project and I didn't get funds because there wasn't enough money. That's behind us. We have money. That's a good thing, okay? The corollary to that is we have a lot of projects. So in the clean water side, we're looking projects that should be ready to receive loans or already have in 2023, almost $1 billion, and almost $500 million on the drinking water side. So by the end of this June, we expect that we've got in our pipeline right now that Charles and Paul and Karen and their teams are working on almost $1.5 billion of projects that are ready to get certified and get either have a short-term loan or will get a short-term loan. And understand, to Charles' point, like when you have a $10 million loan, but you're really only looking for the first $1 million for engineering, we still take $10 million out of the pot and put your name on it. So we don't double count, we don't double end, right? So we might not have spent the money, but we've set it aside. So we're looking at setting aside $1.5 billion by June. And then in 2024, again, almost $900 million on the clean water side and $250,000 on the drinking water side, another $1.14 billion in total. $2.6 billion of projects we expect to provide short-term funding to by June of next year. So let's go back. 2.4, 2.6, right? Almost at parity on those. We got a little bit more in projects than money, but basically we anticipate that all of the funds that we're going to have over the next 2 years will be spoken for. We have another $4.3 billion in backlog that we anticipate will be at some level of readiness after June of 2024. So this just kind of gives you an overview of the program and where it is right now. And I threw some examples up here. There are some very, very large projects that are making their way through their pipeline, and some of these will be part of that, $990 million and $481 million that get certified and get a short-term loan out this year. But you can see Passaic Valley, there's what, $400 million roughly up there just from that one entity. JCMUA, this is just one of the redevelopment projects at JCMUA, $110 million. There's a couple more right behind that. The joint meeting of Essex Union County, $114 million, and we've got a Two Rivers project that we're looking at finalizing before the end of this year. I think that number's a little bit low, maybe by $10 million. So again, there's a lot of money, there's a lot of opportunities. Please don't come in because you were in here 2 years ago knocking on our door and we didn't have funds for you, okay? Enough said on that. All right, so these are the basics, the loan structure. That's what the iBank does, right? So DEP does all the technical reviews. We do all the finance, the credit, the legal work. Rolling applications. Before, you used to have to come in, and I remember when I first joined, you bring boxes in, you drop them off at the DEP in October. You guys would have that one day where everybody would be knocking on basement doors and you guys would stick them into a closet, right? When you're ready, that's when you should be coming into the program, rolling applications. Anytime throughout the year, you come in electronically through H2 loans. I'm not going to steal Alok's thunder, but you can just give us your information and we start a conversation with you. On the clean water side, there's enough funding there that when you're ready to proceed, we're going to work with you to get your loan. On the drinking water side, it is still priority ranked in readiness to proceed, okay? And then lastly, obviously, borrowers, this is a federal program, the Clean Water Act and the Safe Drinking Water Act are really the basis behind what this program is built on. So you must be compliant with those two laws and regulations. So when you come in and you get certified for your different components, when you're ready to get out a short-term loan to take out money and start borrowing and start putting in requisitions for payments, okay? It can be as soon as you have your engineering contract, to Charles's point just a couple of minutes ago, right? We will give you a short-term loan based on the DEP certifying that engineering contract, and we will give you a loan for the total estimated construction cost. You don't have access to those funds, but we'll set those funds aside for you. It's just a number. When you come into H2 loans, do not freak out that you have to put a number in that cell in order to advance your application. That number gets changed repeatedly as engineering comes in and makes adjustments, makes change orders. But we have to have some number in place because that's the number we use to put on the project priority list. Alok will go into that, okay? Planning and design, up to 2 years for planning and design. And if you come in and you get your construction certification, let's say in 9 or 12 months, we'll actually look back for a year and any kind of funding that you've spent, expenses that you've incurred for planning and design previously, as long as it doesn't stretch to 2 years before that first construction contract is certified. This program has always allowed generous cost allowance, so it's not just engineering and construction. It does include legal fees. It does include environmental expenses if you have any of those. It also includes financing costs. We've set this up to try and be the most efficient. There should be no reason why anybody self-funds, okay? We give you money, and you don't pay any interest on those funds if and until you actually draw those funds. So a lot of people like to take out bands to fund construction, right? Well, when you come into this program, if you take out a band, you're paying interest on day one because you sell a band into the market and you get all of that money and you put it in your account. And you start paying interest on it. And you're always going to pay more interest than the bank will pay you interest on the funds that you've got at their bank, right? So you have negative arbitrage. So there's an expense. We don't charge you any interest at all until you actually draw those funds, and only on the funds that are drawn. And currently, we set our interest rates at the total cost of the program as it's spread out. So there's a lot of money that the DEP provides to the iBank for this program. And then we borrow a little bit additional from the private market. So I think it's, let's just say, roughly 5 or 7% of the total amount, right? So when you look at our costs, our current rate is 0.43%, what we in the finance world would call 43 basis points. So it's less than 0.5%. If you're going to go out and do a ban right now, a one-year ban, that's going to cost you roughly around 2.75%. Am I close? Right? 2.75%. So you're borrowing money at 2.25% cheaper than where you can get it yourself. And oh, by the way, it's only on the amount that you've drawn, not the entirety. Okay? Another thing that we do is we're not expecting you to pay that interest until your construction is complete. So there's no out-of-pocket expense for your budget. And if you talk to any mayor or any city council, it's always budget, 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 right? So you don't have any debt service, typically, until your project's complete, you're providing service, and you're actually collecting income on that service. So your debt service matches the timing of your income and your revenues. There is a caveat on that. If your long-term loan goes beyond 3 years, this really has to deal with the local finance law. You have to start paying back, just like any other band that you would take out that exceeds 3 years. I think it's 1/60th of principal. So there is a small amount. I would tell you that I think we've seen it once in this program where somebody's actually had to make a debt service payment because their project went beyond 3 years. We do require credit approval with the local finance board. That's in our statute, our enabling act. But the iBank and our council and your bond council manage that on your behalf. So when your bond council fills out your financial addendum form, they check a box for you to allow the iBank to work on your behalf. Our CFO sends a package over to Jacqueline Suarez, the director at LFB. She signs off on it, assuming that we sign off on it. It's fairly straightforward, our credit policy. 99% of the people, you have an investment grade rating, you get in. If you don't, you can either read the credit policy or you can call our CFO and she'll help walk you through what the limitations or exceptions are to a credit policy. Operable segment loans, we've talked about that a little bit. And again, that's just you've got a project and you want to split your lead service replacement project into 5 different components. We'll make one long-term loan, one short-term loan for you for those 5 separate components. So we kind of blend it all in to save you legal costs, but you will receive the terms for your long-term takeout based on the year that those operable segments are approved. Okay, once your construction is complete, we transition you to long-term financing. And as Charles said, it's the lesser of 30 years or your consulting engineer certified useful life. Would tell you that the DEP does do a smell test. You know, if you've got a pump station and you're saying to us that that pump station is going to be lasting for 100 years, I think we're going to challenge that. But within reason, right? So you determine what the useful life is. If it's less than 30 years, the program will lend you funds for that term. If it's more than 30 years, we can only go out to 30 years. We did get approval on the clean water side for CSO projects to be 45 years. We also got approval on both the clean water and the drinking water program from EPA that if your project is being partially funded with a federal loan program. So the iBank last year, we closed 2 loans with US EPA, 2 WIFIA loans for a total of $721 million. Most of the projects in the pipeline right now are on that portfolio list that we handed to EPA. So if we take out, so we've got 35 years from last year. So this year, the longest you could go is 34 years. Next year, the longest you will be able to go is 33 years. It's based on the term that we have with EPA on those WIFIA loans. If you're not part of the WIFIA loan portfolio, again, the maximum is 30 years unless you're a CSO project. You do receive 2 loans. Again, your bond counsel should be very familiar with this. You get a loan from the state through the DEP. At 0%, you get a loan from the iBank at our all-in AAA cost of funds. You know, when we've got AAA borrowers like many of the counties or the Princetons or Ridgewoods of the state that come in continually, we know we're doing something right, right? This is a very cheap program if AAA rated borrowers are coming into the program. As an example, just in savings, right? All in our 30-year, and this was, before the, if you want to call it the little banking scare that we're going through right now, when rates were about a half to a full percentage point higher, depending on where you are on the interest rate curve, our 30-year all-in tick was 4.83%, right? So if you got the base program where you got half of your funds from DEP at 0% and half of the funds from us at 483, your net borrowing was 2.42%. Again, most people were borrowing at 5% or above for 30-year paper, and you're coming into the program. And so I always like to say, people say, a lot of times we'll get in front of a mayor, and the mayor might not have a financial background, and they're like, look, I want a grant. Come back to me when you guys can offer me a grant, principal forgiveness. And my response to them is, this program is a grant program. It's a grant program on the interest side. Everybody's so used to thinking about grant program on principal side, right? If you can come into the program and borrow 100% of your funds from this program, and you can borrow it at 2.4% relative to where you would borrow it at 5+%, so you're going to save 2.5% on $1 million over 30 years. Let's say that works out to be 30%. What's the difference between that and your debt service, as opposed to you get a 30% principal grant and you borrow the rest of your money at 5%? Your debt service is going to be the same. Your CFO is going to say, I don't care, I'm indifferent. Here's what I have to pay every year in the budget. This program is a grant program. Can't stress that enough. 50/50 is the base rate. Charles walked you through the multitude of opportunities for principal forgiveness, especially if you are or represent a disadvantaged community and you have access to principal forgiveness or 75% of your funds from the department at 0%, right? So the opportunities for savings, even with rates a little bit lower today than where they were 2 months ago, are just huge. We also, thanks to our friends at PFM, continually monitor all of our outstanding debt for refinancing opportunities. And what we do is we pass through our net savings to you. So you'll get a notice from us. You don't even know that we've refinanced it. And we say, hey, we've refinanced our program with this particular series, and your debt service just dropped by X. So you're going to get a credit going forward for the remaining payments. I will say, typically we do a bond deal in May of every year and November of each year. We are not, and this really has to do with where projects are currently in their completion stage. In order to make a large enough deal to make sense, we don't have enough projects that are at or close to fully completed to do a May bond deal. So our bond deal, our next bond deal is going to be in the fall of this year, probably October. But don't hold me to that. Don't give me that look. Okay, so again, kind of what can I save? This is a fairly recent, and I know you can't read the numbers, okay? But if you can look down at the very, very bottom where the red circle is, we have on our website what is called the WISE Act Savings Calculator. The WISE Act was legislation that the New Jersey legislature passed probably maybe 6 years ago, where if you are going to borrow at least $1 million to do a water project, you are required to come into the water bank, into the iBank, and run this WISE Act calculator. And this has interest rates that we post, and you give us your rating. So we've got different interest rate curves depending on what you're rated, AAA all the way down to BBB, okay? And depending on what your rating is, we have an estimate on what your debt service would be for the estimated size of your loan, all right? Then we look at whether you're going to get 50/50 or 75/25 from the state/iBank, and you have the option to make that choice. On a AAA rating for your iBank borrowing and a 0% rating for the DEP borrowing, we do the same calculation and we compare. And it shows for $1 million project, and And again, if you look at the numbers closely, all in, the difference between the cost on the $1 million is $374,000 in difference for a 30-year borrower that's single A or A2 rated, which is, by the way, the average rating of our current portfolio, and our current portfolio has over 300 borrowers, municipalities, water systems throughout the state. So it is a fairly decent representation of the mix of borrowers in this state, right? So if you're an A-rated borrower and what you're going to borrow on your own and you come into the program, you'll save $374,000 or 37% of your project's cost. That's a 37% grant. Now, I'll make the caveat, this is not net present valued, right? Some people might want to see that. I'd say go to Excel, knock yourself out, okay? The debt service, annual debt service, you don't see this, this is page 2, would be the debt service runs. So you don't need necessarily to say, oh, I don't know if I want to go through the iBank or not for a short-term loan and then go through the water bank for long-term financing. I just want to know what my potential debt service would be so I can go to my council or my board and say, we should do this project. Go to the WISAC calculator, go to page 2, and it'll show you what your debt service, projected debt service is for interest rates at that point in time. I couldn't tell you that rates will go up or down, 3 months from now when you're ready to present. Just run the calculator again. Trust me, if I could, I wouldn't be talking to you guys. All right. But I highly recommend people use this just to get an idea of what their debt service will be as they're presenting the potential for financing this to the people that run the purse strings at their entity. Okay? So again, 37% savings. Come to me if you can beat that. I'd love to know how. Maybe we can work a deal. All right, so program fees. There is a 2% of total project cost that the DEP collects. This pays for obviously the salaries of all the people that do the reviews, but certainly any of the hard expenses that they have. The way that we set the financing up is there's a 1% fee at closing of the short-term loan, but the iBank actually lends that to you as part of your short-term loan, right? So you want to borrow $100,000, you've got an expense on day one for engineering on $1 million loan, and you collect all $100,000. It's $1 million loan, you're going to pay $20,000 in origination fee, $10,000 up front. So we actually wire you, we charge you $110,000, right? We give you the $100,000 to pay your engineers, and then we transfer the $10,000 to the DEP. All right? So now your loan is $110,000. The final 1% is collected at long-term conversion. So on your first debt service payment, $10,000 of that debt service payment will go to the DEP to pay the residual. We true it up. So if your loan comes in less than $1 million, right, we true up, let's say it's $900,000, that you would only owe an additional $80,000, right, $180 for the 2%. If it's more than, then we true it up on the other direction. The iBank fee, when we do our bond deal, there's a one-time cost of issuance fee of 10%. Again, I challenge anybody to go out and pay an underwriter, pay the rating agencies, pay your trustees, and do it for less than 10 basis points. So there's a 10 basis, the iBank subsidizes the rest of those costs, right? There is an annual 17 basis point fee. This is new. It used to be 15 basis points. We've not raised our fee for the 35 years that we've been in existence. It is going up to 17 basis points this year. But here's the caveat. That 0.02%, or again, what us finance folks call 2 basis points, we're going to be putting in a separate account, and those funds will be used to supplement the monies that the DEP is spending for technical assistance. So while we're charging it, we're giving it back, right? And we're setting up an account to make sure that the program will be able to pay for technical assistance in perpetuity. Because remember, the DEP funds that are going to pay for technical assistance are coming from Bill, and Bill only lasts for 5 years. At the end of 5 years, what do? We just tell everybody that needs technical assistance, I'm sorry, the federal program expired, right? So we're thinking long-term here. Again, 17 basis points, but the 2 basis points is going to go back into the program and pay for technical assistance for disadvantaged communities. 10 years from now, there should be nobody that comes to us and says, I don't have the resources to keep my program, to keep my system running to the level that the state requires, that our ratepayers deserve. Because you can come into the program and the program will provide you with strategic planning. It will provide you with outreach help. It will provide you with engineering help to get to that point where you can come into the program, show us your project, have the DEP review it, and probably get principal forgiveness or certainly advantageous financing to build it. Credit policy. Since you're giving me the eye all the time, you want to come up here and do this? All right. The program does have a credit policy. So there's two parts of the program, right? We lend funds to folks whose projects qualify under the Clean Water and the Drinking Water program. The other part of our mission that nobody ever talks about is that this is a perpetual program, and the only way that you get a perpetual program is you make sure that the people that you're lending funds to can pay you back. Well, the way you do that is you set underwriting guidelines vis-a-vis a credit policy. So we have a credit policy. By the way, the state treasurer, I think 2 years ago, signed on, so it is a credit policy now, not just for the iBanks bond funds that we lend, but also the SRF funds. It's stated up there, the easy way to do it, I mean, this is our website. I just always go to our website and go to the search box and type in credit policy and click on it and then scroll down to where our policies are listed. So if you don't feel like copying that down or clicking on that link, certainly just go to our website and type in the search bar for credit policy and it'll take you to the policies. The credit policy, again, it is an underwriting tool for us. It really avoids the opportunity for exceptions. And for anybody that's ever dealt with rating agencies, exceptions can be the death knell, right? They always want to know, okay, so here's your underwriting guidelines, but how do you let people that don't fit in your credit program into the program? And what we tell them is, it's locked in. I don't have the ability, this is a policy that's approved by the board, I don't have the ability to say, ooh, we'll kind of let these people slide. So it's very transparent, it's out there, meet the requirements for it, you qualify. I know that your bond counsel talked to Rich Nolan about this issue all the time. Highlights, okay. So again, I mentioned this before, but the easiest way through it, and 95% or more of our borrowers have an investment grade rating. If you don't, we connect you with, again, our friends at PFM Management, and they'll help you talk with the rating agencies to get a rating. Anybody that has a rating that's less than Baa1 or BBB+, which is the top. So the way that the credit rating agencies work is they have AAA, AA, single A, and BBB. And if you're below BBB, you're non-investment grade. It's difficult to qualify for our program. It's difficult to actually get funding from the market per se, right? So everybody wants investment grade risk. So what they do is they segment those 4 ratings into 3 tiers, except for AAA. So AAA is the highest, but you can have AA plus, AA, AA minus, or as Moody's would say, AA1, AA2, AA3, and all the way down. So Baa1, BBB plus is the highest of the BBB segment ratings that you can get. If you have a BBB flat or a BBB minus, the policy requires that you get a second rating agency to rate you. And that rating must be at least investment grade. So we've got one borrower that's BBB minus and Baa2. So they've got a middle BBB and a lower BBB rating. They qualify for the program. Okay? We also require utilities that serve multiple communities. So if you're an MUA, and you have 2 or more communities that you serve. In the old days, we used to look at the ratings of the communities you serve. Now you have to get your own rating, okay? If you're an MUA that just serves one town, we do allow you to use that town's rating to qualify for the program. And to the extent that you have loans outstanding with the program that are in excess of $2 million, you have to maintain that rating for the life of those loans. We do make supplemental loans or residual loans. So if you need more money after either your construction project is long-term finance, and we do have situations where people hit the 3 full fiscal years for construction and they still have expenses that need to be paid for, right? So what we'll do is we'll term you out at the end of your 3 full fiscal years and give you a residual loan, right? And so what's going to happen is your funding terms are going to be dependent on when that construction contract, again, I can't repeat this enough, that construction contract was certified, but the maturity term will be the same as the maturity term of the original loan. All right, that's important. So if it takes you 3 years to walk through your residual loan and you got a 30-year loan on your first, the portion of that project that we long-term financed, then the residual loan will end up with a 27-year maturity. There is a minimum loan size of $150,000, and I would just say to people, look, if it's less than $150,000, your fixed cost to hire your bond counsel, to hire your engineer, to go through the program, you're not going to save enough money at 37% to make up for the difference. So it's not so much that we're looking at it saying we don't want to make a $100,000 loan. We're looking at you saying, look, if you came in for a $100,000 loan, the cost of going through this program would be, you wouldn't save enough to make up for it. All right? Okay, so this is fun stuff. This is kind of recent and very new changes to the program. So we did initiate a extended commercial paper program, and what that does is it allows us to borrow from the public markets for short-term money. Again, it's a commercial paper program. We go out there. Right now, we've got $35 million of exposure. I will tell you, the numbers that we looked at, what was it, $2.6 billion in projects over the next 2 years. There's not enough money at the DEP, really, to be able, on the short-term side, to be able to say, we're going to continue to fund the short-term loan program to the extent that we might not have to borrow a lot of money privately from the short-term loan program, right? Or possibly introduce additional short-term borrowings. So we've set it up. We are using it right now. I would look over the next 5 years for that to expand. WIFIA loans, like I said, we did close 2 loans in April and December of last year for $721 million. And the way that this works is everybody's going to get the same rate that they would normally get if we didn't use WIFIA, right? So WIFIA, borrowing directly from the U.S. Treasury, nobody can borrow that cheap, right, for out to 30 years. So there are parts of the curve that we can arbitrage, the iBank can arbitrage, relative to where we can borrow funds in the municipal market. So if we can borrow from the U.S. Treasury cheaper than where we can borrow from the tax-exempt municipal market, that's what that $721 million allows us, right? And then what we do is we take that savings and we hand it over to the DEP and say, look, you don't have to put as many 0% funds into this program in order to get to the same interest rate. So instead of giving us 50% of the funds, and we'll provide 50% of the funds, maybe you only have to provide 35% of the funds, and we'll get 65% of the funds from WIFIA and maybe some bonds, and we still end up with the same interest rate for borrowers. You just put up 15% less in SRF funds. Now the state has all these excess SRF funds that they can turn around and make additional loans to program borrowers, right? So we're expanding the capacity of the program by using WIFIA loans. We estimate when we close these loans that we saved, DEP saved $114 million in SRF funds Now, that'll change with interest rates and as we implement the $721 million, but it gets us in the ballpark. $114 million of SRF funds that the DEP doesn't have to put up because we're using WIFIA. We do the base program of 50/50. That's 228 million more projects that this program can finance without costing the state or your ratepayers a dime. We did the same thing with an interest subsidy model, which when rates were really, really low, it made sense for, instead of the DEP putting up, say, 50%, put up 5%. We'll borrow the other 45%, but with rates so low, you're going to pay the interest on that additional 45%, not the borrowers. So the borrowers are still only going to pay interest on 50% of their money. You're going to pay the interest on the other 45% that we borrowed from the market, and it ended up saving the DEP $23 million, another $46 million, right? So really, last year, in aggregate, we're looking at around $275 million of additional projects that the program can now finance over the ensuing years because of initiatives like this. One last thing, and this really came to light with the volatility in the banking market over the last, with Silicon Valley Bank. When we went through COVID, and for anybody that was involved in the municipal market, it disappeared. I think I've seen this maybe twice in my entire life, my career on Wall Street, where we lost that kind of liquidity, right? It happened after 9/11 for a couple of days. Stock market shut down. Nobody could borrow bonds. People were worried about defaulting on short-term paper. Not to get too into the weeds, but we have cross-default language in our loans, which means if you're a borrower and you default on a loan away from us, I'm not going to be the last person shutting the lights off. I want to be at the front of line like everybody else, making sure that we get paid before you go into bankruptcy. So again, it's called cross-default language. So we have cross-default language. Well, you've got a ban outstanding. That's a liability. COVID hits. Nobody knows what's going to happen with municipalities. The ban market disappears for the better part of a week. Anybody that had a ban that was maturing and they needed to roll it over were having problems rolling that ban over. If they can't roll that ban over, they default. Cross-default language in our language says you defaulted on the program. That's a payment default. To avoid all of that, we created the ban purchase program. So if you are a participant in our program and there is a declared disaster by the governor, and you have a ban that is rolling over and liquidity disappears, we can actually go out and purchase $5 million per participant of bans up to $50 million. So we'll use $50 million of our liquidity to go out and support the ban market for our participants to make sure that you can roll over your bans, that you don't default on them, and therefore you don't default on your cost default language on loans that you have outstanding with us. Upcoming initiatives. So the FEMA BRIC program, this is the Build Resilient Infrastructure Communities program. It's run by the Office of Emergency Management out of the State Police, NJOEM. We've worked with them very, very closely after Sandy and the SAIL disaster program that we have up and running. So we are collaborating with them to develop a portal for easier application. We're looking to increase the capacity for the state since this is a competitive FEMA grant program. We want to make sure that we have a pipeline of pre-disaster resilience projects. Those projects oftentimes will be co-funded with SRF dollars because most of the time they're water related, right? So it was our experience in our relationship with OEM, it made sense for them to say to the iBank, hey, would you guys help us? We know you have H2 loans. That's a great portal. We want you to build something like that that actually feeds into H2 loans so we can co-fund our BRIC program funds with your SRF program. There is a new federal program that was funded and built called STORM. What does that stand for? sustaining, safeguarding tomorrow, something resilience, whatever. Yeah, so it's and again, it's kind of like a pre-disaster stormwater management project, but it is not just for water. It will also include energy. It will also include transportation. There is a bill right now. It has the support of the front office. It passed the entire assembly. It passed most of the committees in the Senate. We're hoping that it goes tomorrow in the full vote. If it goes tomorrow in the full vote, it will have been passed by the Senate. And then, of course, we're hoping that the governor signs it. If he does, it sets up a new revolving loan program in the state for resilience programs. There is a small amount of funding that will be available if we get this loan passed tomorrow to the state and a couple of other states that have passed laws like this, maybe $10 million the first year. Right? But this is another co-funding opportunity for resilience projects. The iBank has been pegged to be the bank for NJOEM, very similar to the relationship that we have with DEP. So NJOEM will be the grant recipient from FEMA, just as DEP is the grant recipient from EPA. The funds will come in, they will be appropriated to the iBank. We will act as the bank, just as we do right now for the water program. I guarantee you there will be multiple co-funding opportunities with the SRF program. This is just one more opportunity for people that have resilience projects to look for multiple ways of financing, and you will be coming into the iBank/DEP or iBank/NJOEM for these funds. So stay tuned, and I'm going to put a little pitch in here. If you've got relationships with your senator, please call them up and make sure tomorrow this bill is on their docket to get voted on and that they vote for it. But I'm not allowed to lobby. And then emergency funds, our statute was changed really just in the event that the feds provide some sort of emergency funding, like let's say COVID happens again, right? We have the authority now to act as a conduit for the state for those kinds of funds. I wouldn't imagine, unless it was those funds were water or transportation related, that this is part of our statute that we will be using, but it is there. And I believe, yes, I was going to say I believe that's it. Do we have time for any questions?
We do and we don't. I want to get through at least one or two of these, and then we can go.
Okay.
So, do SFY23 funds roll over into 24 if they don't get used? It reads as if there's actually no money left, but the comments are all about how we have money. On the next slide, it says it's all allocated. Can you comment on that? Is there actually anything available for projects who are just starting out with an EDD?
So the answer is yes, monies do roll over, right? So you have to just think of this as a lifeline, right, from today out into perpetuity. So these funds become available. Now, I will say that there is a clock on these funds, so that you have to ask for them, be appropriated to them, and then you have to use them. And I forget what's the term on the bill funds? Do you know? Like when we have to actually use each year?
Ultimately, it'll be 7 years from now. The
Okay.
ARPA funds have to be awarded by December of 2024 and dispersed by December 2026.
Right, so those are the funds we're using first.
Yes.
So we'll manage that. So yes, the answer is they do roll over. There are a couple of restrictions on that, but not anything that we're currently worried about. And so to the point about $2.4 billion in funding versus $2.6 billion in projects, look, I'll say this to everybody. On the clean water side, right now it's pretty much first come, first serve, right? So get your projects in, work with the department. If the department sends you deficiency notices, respond to those deficiency notices quickly, because it's to your benefit. Now, at the end of 2024, we're not going to run out of money, right? So not all of that $2.6 billion realistically will close a short-term loan by the end of next June. That's what we anticipate right now. But you know what, man plans and God's laughs or something like that, right? So yes, I absolutely expect that some of those projects will fall off. They'll fall off from a timing perspective, right? And they'll roll over into year 3. And so those funds will roll over into year 3, and we'll have another $500 million or $600 million worth of funds available in 2000 in the third year, right? 2025. And then, like, what we do here at the iBank, so the DEP does a phenomenal job with the projects. I think we do a pretty good job on the finance side. So this interest rate subsidy, the WIFIA, we will continue to look for ideas to find additional leverage at no or very cheap cost to expand the capacity of the program. So again, if you have a project, it is at all related to water, and it is anything but redoing a dam, because that's USRDA, the Department of Agriculture. Anything but that. Come into us and talk to us. That should be like statement number 1. If you have a water project, come into us and talk to us.
Next question.
You got me all riled up.
I know. Is the expectation that applicants will self-fund and construct until their project has funding available to be allocated for a long-term loan?
No, do not self-fund. My biggest pet peeve. There is no reason for you to self-fund. If you do self-fund, we're going to be all over you to give us at a minimum quarterly requisitions so that the department and the iBank can stay on top of your program. I'll go back, it must have been 7 years ago. We had a project that was certified for financing. This was before we had short-term loans and all that. Certified for financing, went ahead, did their project. 7 years after completion, they came in and gave us a stack that had to be 6 inches thick with supporting documentation and all of the expenses that they had spent 7 years prior. Anybody that's ever done a construction project, as soon as you cut ground, you have a change order. Whatever you thought, it's different. So how can the DEP look at your change order and approve your change order or give you comments on what you need to do? And 7 years later, you're going to come into us, or even 3 years after that, and say, hey, I'm done. I self-funded. Here's all my expenses. Wrong. Self-funding does not work well with this program, right? You risk having some of your expenses denied or kicked out. So again, come into us, get your short-term loan. It's cheap, it's easy, it makes everything work well.
And also, short-term loan is the only way that you can preserve principal forgiveness.
Correct. Thank you. What he said.
Another question, is the minimum loan term now 30 years, no longer 20?
That's correct. It's not minimum, it's maximum, right? But so this had to be, 5 years ago. We moved from 20 years to 30 years, and then we went back and changed our statute again. So 35 years if you're on a federal loan, if you're receiving funds in a federal, it doesn't say 35 years. What it says is you're entitled to the maximum amount of loan term pursuant to a federal program if you're receiving funds from that federal program. Most federal programs are 35 years. So we say 35 years, but technically our statute says either the lesser of your useful life or 30 years, or if you're on a federal loan portfolio, the longest term of that federal loan.
And then finally, in response to the previous question regarding the availability of funds, what if the applicant can't wait due to pending regulation or ACO? You still have to go through all of the program approvals, whether you come in for a short-term loan or not.
Right.
So I would advise to join the session
For
that we have
operations.
for operations after this,
Right.
for any further questions.
Right, because I'm sure Charles has some comments on that.
Okay. And with that, we will skip ahead.
Okay.
Go to Alok.
Next up is our project manager, our business analyst for H2 loans, Alok Sabharwal.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Yeah, it's tough to follow after David, you know. Yeah, but I'll keep it short in the interest of time. So by no means it's a comprehensive overview of H2 loans. So many people in the audience and probably even online may already be familiar with it. But for the others, you know, it'll just give you a little more than you know. And obviously you can always contact us so we can actually, you know, work with you one-on-one basis, right? So as we've heard, you know, this term H2 loans, you know, during the course of the webinar. So as David also mentioned, as and when you are ready, you know, to submit an application, you know, like it's a rolling application program, right? You come into this portal. It's called as h2loans.com, right? And this is how the home page looks. Now, to get into the system, you obviously need an account. So this is where, at this email address, you know, you keep this email address handy. It's like I always tell everybody, not only for new account requests, but any issues or any concerns, or even any feedback which you may have in the future, you know, for us to help you out with. So you come into us and you just tell us, you know what, we need an account. We belong to this entity. And then we'll ask you a few questions, some basic information, your email addresses, your phone numbers, you know, physical address and all that stuff. And we'll give you an account.
Very googly looking.
Yes, you know, very simple, very minimal, you know, so like Google.
But you have to be a employee of the borrower, correct?
Correct, to be an authorized, to be given certain roles. Yeah, so since, you know, it's a role-based system, you know, different users can perform different functions. So if you have to create a project, you have to be an authorized rep, which can only be somebody who is a full-time employee, like David mentioned, of the entity, right? Now, keep in mind, there can be other users who can work on the projects too, like your bond counsels, like consulting engineers. They all can still also have access to the systems. But what they can do will be determined by the role they have in the system. So everybody cannot fill out a form or submit a form or submit a requisition, so on and so forth. So this example which I have up here is how the home page looks like if you're an authorized rep. So you can see your list of projects and you can also create a project. The ability to create a project would not be there if you are not an authorized rep. That only belongs to that role. And this is just a little, you know, zoomed up version where you can see a list. So it develops and goes on the longer you are in the program and the more projects you have going on. So at some point you can actually see, you know, more than one here. A little bit about the layout of the project. So when you come in and you click on the project, it'll show you a project details page. Everything you navigate is through the vertical bar on the left. What I'd also like to add here is under project management, you can actually also request a pre-planning meeting. So as and when you come with the project, you don't know much about it, you want to have a discussion, you go in there and you request a meeting. Emails go to the department and, you know, the iBank, and someone will reach out to you to schedule a meeting with you to walk over, you know, the processes. And what you can also see is, you know, contacts, all the documents. This will be your go-all as you move along, you know, into the project. Under application documents, you can actually see all of the forms. So just to mention, to keep moving forward in the process so that you can actually avail the amount of funds available, we highly recommend you keep doing these forms as and when they are made available to you. Because if you wait on a form and it remains in progress, the department cannot review your project any further. And that may delay you getting the project, right? So like, you know, if you fill out a project information form but don't submit it, you cannot get ranked and you cannot move into the project priority list, which makes you not eligible to be in the list which can get funding. So similarly, you will have other forms as well, which you need to fill out on time for DEP and the iBank to continue working at a good pace with you hand in hand. Anytime you take an action in H2 loans, you will be notified, so you know what happened. And as you can also see, this is an example of the first step being done, the project information. So the department gets notified, the iBank gets notified, you have a confirmation, and it'll also tell you the next steps. So you know what's coming up next, what you need to do, what the timelines are. If you have any questions which are deeper than this, in your project contacts, you have names and numbers and email addresses. You can always reach out to your reviewers and other contacts. So they can actually work with you more than what the system may show you. This is the newest edition. You can now have the construction group can now issue you inspection reports from within H2 loans. And you can actually see your whole history, your interim, your final, your performance, all can be created now here. And as and when they are created, you can see emails go out with inspection letters being issued. As and when the contracts get created, you can feed in the contact information here as well, like your bids, for example, you can do that here. The requirement for this only is that the contract has to be created already. You cannot upload a document if there's no contract on the project yet. Requisitions. This was something which was built in right when COVID started, right? So, and this has been a very successful update to H2 loans. As a matter of fact, I didn't know that on Friday when I did the webinar, I gave an example of a requisition we approved of $14 million, a single requisition which had over 150 invoices. It so happened the CFO of that town was in the audience. I did not know him, but we met after the meeting and he appreciated how efficient it was to put everything in the system and avoiding a whole stack of paper going around. And what it also does, it builds a history for you at every level on the project. So it becomes a total repository. That's our goal. So that, anytime you need any auditing done, you tell the auditor to come to H2 Loans. And we can do that for them. We can make an account which gives them permissions to view things which you want them to review. And they can actually see all of that stuff as well.
Look, just as an example,
Sure.
I signed a requisition yesterday for, I think it was roughly $500,000 that went through our system in 4 days, right? We never would have been able to do that when we were paper-oriented pre-COVID. So that's how fast the turnaround time is, assuming that when you folks put the requisitions in, you provide the requisite and necessary supporting documentation. But 4 days, state's paying you money, right? Depositing it in your bank account. I think that's unheard of.
Yeah, true. And on an average, 2 weeks, from the point of your submission, and you can actually track everything into H2 Loans. And if you have any further questions, every requisition, every project has a payment manager assigned to it. And you can actually always contact them if you have any further questions, or any backup documentation missing or needing, to be provided.
Contact information in H2 Loans?
Yes, it's on the project contacts. It's there. The entire form is electronic. Only 2 forms have to be signed. Those are also filled out in the system, given you as a PDF, and you just sign them and upload them back. That's it. So it basically carries over the form information you filled in, gives you a paper form, you sign it, and it goes in. And that is your requisition form and the SLP 101. Any documentation uploaded, approved, generated throughout the course of a requisition also stays there in a folder called requisition files. So the example I was giving regarding a 14 million rec, it had 150 invoices which were reviewed by DEP. So the good part is there is no size limit and there's no number of files limit in the system. And we don't purge data, so it will stay in there for the longest time. As I come in closing, we have a living list. It's a public version, which is available on njib.gov. This list actually provides you a list of all projects currently ranked, and again, the ranking determines, a lot of funding which programs, receive. And what sponsors can also see other projects which are competing, and also the color coding provides a detail of where your project is in terms of the progress, so you can actually see it. So I would highly, as I come to the closing, right, one thing I would highly suggest people is that make sure that you're feeding everything you do outside the system into the system. Because if they're not in the system, DEP cannot progress because they don't know what's going on. And everybody, all users, go to H2 Loans because they have accounts to see a project and not having to call anybody and ask, hey, what's the status? As long as it's in there, people know it, people get emails, so everybody's good there. So I think, and back again to the basics, that's your portal to go to, and that's the email address. If you have any questions ever, feel free to reach out to us. We get back to you within a couple of hours most of the times, so we can certainly help you out there. I think that's it. Any questions, anybody? So
4 minutes. The remaining questions, I think, will be better served answered in the breakout sessions. So
Okay.
for those that have the operations questions, please join the operations group. Anything finance related, please join the finance group. And then we have one more, which is the legal breakout session.
And George, the links for that are,
On the webpage, and I'm going to put it in the chat as well right now.
so if people don't know how to access the chat on Teams, they can just go to our website. And there's a banner?
Right at the
or-
top.
Right
Yep.
at the top, great. And so the way that we'll work it for people here that are in person, the operations breakout session is going to happen here in this room. So if you want to talk to the DEP or the operations group that works with George as the COO here, stay here. The legal group will be in the small conference room, and that's going to be, where's Judy?
Judy just.
Okay, so Judy Karp and our bond counsel, Rich Nolan from Carter English. And then anybody that wants to talk about finance, the executive director's office, which is right around this wall, we'll all meet there. Okay? Let's take 2 or 3 minutes. You guys want to grab food or drink or whatever, and we'll start at 11:30. Thank you, everybody.